Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this Fireside Chat, our third Fireside Chat hosted by Harvard HTL. We have a very special guest today, Vikram Oberoi. I don't think he needs any introduction. We're going to have a fun conversation. It's not just about him as Managing Director of East India Hotels. It's about Vikram Oberoi as a person. So before I go in and invite him to join us, I just do a couple of housekeeping stuff. Please recognize that all of you are on mute so that we can have a smooth conversation. We have received a lot of questions, and I am going to try and weave in those questions into the conversation and ask some specific questions as well out of what you have sent us. And if you do have more questions to ask, there is a question box at the bottom of the screen that you will find in each of your different apps or browsers. Please feel free to ask your questions through that. Our team will monitor the questions and pass them on to me. There is an option of raising a hand, but the presenter as myself, I'm not going to be seeing that, so really don't bother with that. But please do ask your questions at any time through the chat. With that, I'd like to welcome Vikram. If you would please join us, put on your camera and your microphone, and if you can please join us. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Vikram Oberoi with us. Vikram, if you'd like to say hello to everybody, and then we can start talking about Oberoi and Oberoi Hotels.
Right, Vijay. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. A very good afternoon to people who've joined, and thank you for taking your time to join Vijay and myself today. Thank you very much.
So, Vikram, when you think of Oberoi Hotels, there's two words that come to mind: excellence and luxury. And that's been consistent for so many years. Tell me, what is it that makes that possible? What is it that makes it happen?
So, you know, I remember my grandfather, and he had an obsession with guests and with guest feedback, and I've seen Mr. Oberoi follow that as well. Luxury for us is, number one, listening to what our guests have to say and providing them with a level of care and service that is beyond their expectation. And for that, again, without sounding like a broken record, Mr. Oberoi always says, you know, the most important, if you talk to him about anything, any meeting, the first thing he'll say to you is the most important aspect of our business are our people. And that resonates with me. It holds true in my heart and in my mind. And if we listen to what our guests say, you know, our guests come from around the world. We have many guests from India, we have guests from Europe, we have guests from North America. One thing that they consistently say, irrespective of their background, their culture, their geography, is they talk about the level of service and care and sincere, personalized, meaningful care that our colleagues provide at our hotels. And that, to me, is the essence of what we do. I don't know whether you can call that luxury, but it's at the very heart of our organization. It is looking after our guests like we would look after a member of our family, a dear friend, and providing that experience to them. It's also about picking up the things, you know, trying to anticipate what they need, about being sincere, about being genuine in our behavior. And Vijay, although we have many standards that are documented, we are absolutely fanatical about documenting our standards, documenting our SOPs, so that we provide the training and support for our people. But ultimately, what we say is do what you believe is right and apply our values, our dharma in making those calls. Because if you just follow our standards, you may not do what is right. You'll do certainly right what is by our standards, but ultimately what we have to do is what is right for our guests.
I think that's fantastic, because if you really empowered the people after training them and after virtually imbibing that quality standard within them and then giving them the empowerment, then they can really blossom out of it. But I guess the question is that it's one thing to set the benchmarks. The challenge is to maintain them all the time. I mean, every service industry, forget the manufacturing sector, which has to maintain quality, but even the service sector, that maintaining of that quality and that excellence level at a consistent standard is something that Oberoi Hotels has been able to achieve over the years. And hopefully, as we talk through today, there will be other snippets that you will talk about that will give us an understanding about that maintenance of that quality. But you alluded to the guests' statements about the quality of service standards at the hotels. Now, in the context of what we are seeing with pandemic and some of the changes that are being forced as a result of that, do you think Asian service standards, Asian hospitality, that kind of stuff is going to have to change in some form? Or will it be just a short-term thing? Will it be a long-term thing? Will it not need to change at all?
So it's a very good question, Vijay, and we were concerned, with all the safety standards that we introduced when COVID happened in what took really we grappled across the industry with it. And what we did during the lockdown was put down very detailed standards. And this included the things that all of us do today, wearing face masks, wearing shields, etc. And one of our concerns was, are we going to maintain the warmth? Will people be able to see the warmth and the care that each one of us have as we deal with our guests and also as we deal with each other? It's equally important. We can't just do it with our guests. We have to do it first with each other before we do it with our guests. And only if we do it with each other can we expect it to happen with our guests. And so we were very concerned about that. And if you've been to our brand website, these are extremely detailed standards that we made available. We put them on our website for anybody and everybody to see. But that was a concern we had. And fortunately, our NPS scores, Net Promoter Scores, have gone up substantially. At Oberoi Hotels, our NPS is at about 91% year-to-date January for the financial year. So that has improved over even what it was prior to the pandemic, albeit marginally. And therefore, I think, again, even with all those safety standards, what people are looking to be treated as valuable human beings. And I think our colleagues do that with every guest who comes through the doors of our hotels. And I just want to say one other thing, Vijay, we're far from perfect. We are human beings. We do make mistakes. We sometimes get things wrong. But it again starts from a mindset. What is the mindset that we have? And I hope I'm correct in saying that the mindset that all of us have at Oberoi and Trident Hotels is a mindset that says not even one guest should ever leave an Oberoi or Trident Hotel unhappy. And that's not to say that we can make every guest happy. We aren't perfect, as I said. But if we have that mindset, when things go wrong, and they do sometimes go wrong, when we make errors, and we do make errors, how we all come together to react and make up for that wins the hearts and the minds of our guests, I hope.
Yes, you actually made a very important point here in the sense that recognizing the fact that with all the standards that you've set and the excellence you've achieved, you're still not perfect, and there is scope for improvement. I think when there is that kind of a fundamental attitude, one can only look forward and improve even more, even in the most minute ways. So I think that is a big lesson for all of us, that never consider it as done. There's always things to do going forward. So that's valuable. Please.
Vijay, may I just add one thing to that is what's really important from our perspective, and I think I speak on behalf of every single person who's at our hotels, is how do we create a culture that encourages people to do that little bit extra for our guests? And then how do we capture those moments and those best practices, and how do we share that across Oberoi and Trident hotels? We have, like I said, we've got very detailed standards, and many of these standards, we have things that we have to do unless we feel it's wrong for that moment and for that guest, and we have things that can be done to surprise and delight guests. So, and we've got those both documented. But a lot of the learnings that have come over the years are actually from things that we've noticed people do and said, wow, this was incredible. What a great idea. Certainly I wouldn't have thought about it, but our people have thought about it. How can we capture that? How can we share that? How can we celebrate that? And how can we encourage others to emulate that?
Again, learning lessons for everybody in the industry as you look to improve standards. I mean, everybody doesn't have to be a luxury space, but in every sector, and not just in the hotel sector, in every aspect of the service sector, including where I am. I think this is a lesson to learn in terms of how we can do things better. But tell me, let's change tack quite significantly in a sense. How is it to interact with your grandfather? And the reason I bring that here is A, to understand that personal interaction, but in terms of learning and the standard setting that have become a part of the philosophy. What was it like to work with him, or to interact with him at a family level, and then to learn from him as a professional?
Right, so there are a few things. First of all, I loved my grandfather, and I remember him with both high regard and deep love. That's how I remember my grandfather. And when I returned to and started working in our hotels, I remember I was in Bombay. My first job was actually in receiving at the hotel at Trident Nariman Point. And my grandfather used to send me articles, and for each of the articles I used to get a small note with certain things in the article underlined. And when I look back, I think he played such an important role or he was such an important role model in my life. And he did this consistently. I used to do reports that I used to send to him, and he would read through the reports, he would ask questions. He gave me a lot of positive encouragement. He's somebody I felt very...
What is the one thing you learned from him?
So let me tell you a story about that, Vijay. So, when my grandfather was working, and he worked well into his 90s, we didn't have e-questionnaires. Our questionnaires were paper. They were signed by him. And I remember going and seeing him at his home, and I'm just going to hold a piece of paper up to demonstrate. So he had, I don't know if you met him, Vijay, but he had very poor eyesight when he was in his 90s. And I remember him reading something like, where the paper was this close to the guest comment, was literally inches away from his eyes, so that he could read what our guests were saying. And I understand that he used to read every guest comment. And so what I learned from him is really the obsession for our guests and for our guest experience. The other thing I learned from him is, people, when I worked in receiving, and then I worked in butchery at Trident Nariman Point, many of our team knew him well. He used to come to the hotel, and I'm not talking about executives and managers and general managers. I'm saying people who worked, our colleagues who worked in the butchery, in various other parts of the hotel. And for him, or for them, he was, number one, very accessible. Number two, he was somebody who they deeply respected. Number three, they felt that if they had a problem, they could go and talk to him, and he'd do whatever he could, number one, to listen to them, and number two, help them. And so I learned probably humility. I'll tell you another amazing story, Vijay, from him. This is when he was in his, even beyond his 90s, when he was about 100. We all as a family and many of us who worked in the company would go and wish him on his birthday. And he would sit in a particular chair, and I remember the taxi drivers as an example, but he did this with everybody. The taxi drivers at the Oberoi New Delhi, they knew him. Some of them had now handed over their taxi business to their children. And when they came to see him, he would get up and welcome them in the same way you would welcome a guest at an Oberoi hotel. And it doesn't matter who the person was, he made them feel that they were the most important person when they entered the room. And I don't think it was an act. He didn't do this. He did this because it came from his heart. He thought it was important. So I also learned humility from him. And I could go on. He was, and I'm going to say one other thing about him. I never saw him, I always saw him calm. No matter what the circumstance, and he dealt with many, many challenges. Business was growing. He had to deal with many situations and many challenges, but I always saw him calm and composed. So I learned a lot from him. Although I never had the good fortune of working directly with him, but I did learn a lot. And I'm sure many of our colleagues who've been with the company, Mr. Sybil, some of us may know Mr. Sybil. He's a bit of a veteran in our industry. Similarly, I've learned from other colleagues of ours who've been there, who worked with him. And we learn from these incredible stories that we hear. It helps shape who we are as individuals and as professionals.
That's fantastic, and I think it's sort of it speaks to the importance you've always given to people, not just sorry, even in the guest aspect and the people who are working in the organization, but you continue to give importance to the people aspect. I think probably starts from there in some form. I am going to come and ask you a question about what you've learned from Mr. P.R.S. Oberoi, your father, but I think we're going to break up that into two separate conversations so that we don't merge the two learnings. Talking about the people side, I know you're very passionate about the people aspect as well. Tell me, what is it about it that drives you? What are your beliefs about that from a longer term perspective?
So I'm trying to understand the question, Vijay, and maybe if you could just maybe phrase it's such a wide topic, the way you've phrased the question. And I'm happy to have a go at that as well. I mean, there's no issue.
No. Let me be more precise. Let me be more precise. I know. I've heard you speak about the people aspect of the business, and you've been passionate about it, the people and the training aspect. And you have already alluded to its importance in the delivery of excellence. But in today's context, in the context of the younger generations and their needs and aspirations, how are you handling the people's aspects in Oberoi Hotels generally, maybe during the pandemic and the challenges of the pandemic, and for the future? How are you grooming the leaders for the future?
Right. So I can break that into three broad buckets. One is, selection is key. And one thing that Mr. Oberoi has always said is select for the person's attitude. Don't select for technical competency. And much of what the majority of people we select across our organization are they're just coming into the business. They've just graduated from hotel school and they're just starting their careers. So we don't really check so much for technical competency, but we check, do they have the right attitude? And if we were to break that up slightly further, do they have the right values? And these are human values. If you read our Dharma has human values. It's fairly simple in what it says, but those values are, we need to follow them, not 99% of the time, but 100% of the time. So we focus on selection based on those values for the for every position, but even more so at entry level, because people hopefully grow through the organization. So as for other positions, growth comes from within to a large extent, not entirely, but to a large extent. The second thing is really support people and nurture people in their learning. And training plays an important role in that. But training has also changed so much. I talk to my children, and I remember when I went to school, we had a teacher who stood in front of the class, and we all listened to the teacher. We asked questions if we had the courage, and that was it. But training, I think, has really evolved. How do we make it more interactive? How do we bring about training where people find the answers for themselves, either individually or as a group? And if I find the answers myself, I have far greater ownership to those answers. And these are more the softer skills. Technical competency comes through not only training, but also through practice. So that is built over a period of time. So the second aspect is really nurturing. Sorry, if you were.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
The second aspect is really providing training, supporting people as they learn. And the third aspect is providing an environment that people enjoy being with. If I don't enjoy what I'm doing, I'm not going to want to do it. How do we create an environment in our hotels where people, number one, feel valued, where they can really make a difference, where it's not, it's their hotel, where it's their guests. So how do we create a culture that strongly supports that? And if we enjoy what we're doing, we enjoy the people we work with, we enjoy our guests, we're going to excel, and guest feedback and guest experiences are going to be very, very good. So really selection, training, and then the culture we create that really allows that to flourish.
Yeah, and that is what also helps maintain that standard in a sense, because people get that confidence to be able to deliver that service with the comfort in the organization. But I'm going to ask you a question about the hotel managers of the future. I think, unlike the past, where hotel managers were more delivery, concentrated on the delivery side of things or the service side of things, there is a trend now and sort of a demand from people as well that, listen, they want to be a little more involved in the business. They want to be more business-like. How do you see that evolving? And do you see that as something that you will be imbibing into your management track at Oberoi Hotels?
Again, a really good question. And although I haven't worked with some of them, I have worked with some, but not with others. If I see many of our managers at Oberoi, both past and present, they have gone on to do amazing things. Whether they started their own hotel companies, whether they've gone into senior roles at other hotel companies, or even within our organization. But I think our managers have always looked at the business aspect as well. And that's really I'm coming from the fact that our managers have demonstrated those skills and have achieved growth as a result. So I don't think, at least I hope, it's nothing new for us. And I would imagine it's similar for other hotel companies as well. I don't think we are unique in this. And I have to tell you some amazing things. You asked about Mr. Oberoi, and we'll come back to Mr. Oberoi. But Mr. Oberoi, I've been in the room when Mr. Oberoi will call a general manager up and ask all kinds of questions. How many units of electricity were consumed? What is the talk about various line items of expense? Talk about, so not only about guests, but about the business as well. And if Mr. Oberoi is talking to you, if you don't know the answer the first time, you need to make sure you know the answer the second time. So I used to tell some of our general managers, why don't you carry a little sheet in a small piece of paper in your pocket so that you have all this important information, so when you get a call, you're equipped to answer it. But it's not only answering, you can only answer if you understand. And I think, Mr. Oberoi, if you talk to people within our organization, Mr. Oberoi has played a critical role in their learning and in their development, because he will ask so many questions, and it's important that we know the answers to those questions. And many of them are business-related questions, although Mr. Oberoi will ask about colleagues, about guests, but equally he'll ask about the business as well. So I think that's something that all of us need to do. General managers need to do that with people working in the hotel. If I'm working even, let's say, in front office or food and beverage, if I understand the financial aspect, and I'm talking about entry-level positions, if I understand the financial aspects of the business, I'm more conscious of the things that I do that will help drive profitability, both by top line and by expense management. And again, Mr. Oberoi always says, you know, don't cut costs, eliminate waste. So that's a mantra we follow within our organization.
Okay, I do believe that across the board there is sort of a possibility of making managers a little more business ownership, more thinking than just responding. So that's something that that maybe I don't know how things will change in the future. But let's move to another subject. Let's move away from direct business to you as a person. As an Oberoi, born as an Oberoi, you're actually living the brand. How challenging is that?
Well, do you know, first of all, I love what I do. I love the people I work with. I spend a fair bit of time communicating and talking to our guests. So I really enjoy every aspect of my work. So if I were to answer it very bluntly, I would say it's something that I enjoy and I love doing, and it's, you know, fairly straightforward. And maybe I'm simplifying it, but it's something that I feel really passionate about.
But is it a challenge, or has it been a challenge at times to say that, listen, I have to be like this and I don't have the ability? Or let me ask you the question differently. Was a career outside hotels ever a possibility?
Actually, you know, if going back, I don't think Mr. Oberoi ever forced me to join the business. I grew up, you know, we lived in hotels. So I was born in Calcutta. My parents lived at the Oberoi Grand. My sister and I lived with them, of course. When the Oberoi New Delhi opened, we moved to the Oberoi New Delhi. And we lived in the hotel for many, many years before we even had a home. Our home was the hotel. So that's something that I don't know, maybe I felt comfortable with. It was part of my childhood and my growing up. So I haven't, you know, it's been really part of me right from the time I was born. And I feel in a way very lucky to, you know, to grow up in the business that I finally am joining.
Okay, so it's been a natural progression for you, and I guess it's a responsibility, but you're saying it's become part of you now, or has always been, actually, in a way.
Yes, and again, if we just break that down, what, you know, how do we spend our time? We spend our time with our colleagues, and I spend time at corporate office with colleagues that I work with. I spend time with colleagues at our hotels, and I spend time with our guests. And I find, the interaction that I have with each one of those people very enjoyable.
Okay. Outside work, what is your relaxation?
Oh, I don't know if I can talk to you about
I know
that.
you have a great interest in motorbikes, and I think we should talk about it. Because I guess it's a hobby, it's an interest.
It's yes, I ride motorcycles. I've ridden motorcycles from childhood, actually. So it's something that I enjoy. I actually don't ride on public roads, interestingly enough. I choose not to. I don't ride on roads because I think they are dangerous places to ride a motorcycle. So I prefer to ride on a racetrack. It's a controlled environment. Tracks today are extremely safe, and it's somewhere where you can you don't need to worry about what others may do. So it's a lot safer and more fun.
And what got this interest going?
Vijay, it started so long ago that I couldn't even answer that question. I don't know. I've been riding motorcycles since maybe I was 10, maybe even before that. So it's been a long time. Maybe in the beginning. I beg your pardon?
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I said maybe in the beginning it was just the thrill, the excitement. Today when I ride motorcycles, it's almost like meditation for me. Or in fact, it is my meditation. I'm able to just be in that moment. And it's not that I ride so much. I probably ride 3 hours in a month. So it's not that I'm riding all the time, but those 3 hours are a time when I am in that moment, and nothing else is in my mind.
It's your relaxation away from work, and I believe you're somewhat like a Parsi, because you've got your motorcycles even in your house, right? And you know the Parsis, they're always cleaning and maintaining their motorcycles. Are you that way as well?
If Parsis do that, then I am a Parsi.
Okay. Yeah, Parsis have a sort of a strong interest in their cars and the motorbikes, and they're always keeping it spick and span and polishing it all the time. What other interests? I believe you have some culinary skills. Tell us about that.
So no, I wouldn't say I'm particularly good at cooking, although I used to cook quite a lot, and I do much. In fact, I don't really cook now. When I had more time for holidays, I used to go. At that time, my girlfriend, now my wife, in London, she had a home there, and I used to cook for her, and then later on for the children. But unfortunately, I don't do much of that anymore. And I think it's really them being kind, or them, but they always built my morale and said I cooked well. I don't know if I cooked that well, but they certainly told me I did. And if you're cooking for a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, fortunately you whatever you cook actually is something that they appreciate. So it wasn't so difficult, but I wouldn't say I'm a great cook. But
are you saying that they're being polite?
I beg your pardon?
Are you saying they're being polite, following the Oberoi mantra of being good to people?
Well, I think Stephanie probably was being polite or being smart because she knew if she told me it was great, I'd cook more. So she probably did it for other reasons. The children, I think, I mean, kids are incredibly honest, right? So you know, they'll tell you how it is. So, you know, whether I fix, and our kids like pasta, so pasta is very easy to fix, and I can do, you know, reasonably good pasta. So I think that the children enjoyed the food that I'd cook, and maybe it's something I need to do now again. You know, cook for the kids.
Okay, that's good.
Let's go back. Vijay, I'm going to tell you one amazing story. So, and you know, I've learned so much from my children, and I have twins who are 13 years old. My daughter during the lockdown, and I could tell you incredible stories about her. She's raised money for various charities, and I'll tell you two stories that are quite remarkable. The first one is that she, on her days off when they were studying in India at the American school, she would go, there's a Mother Teresa's charity quite close to the Maiden's Hotel, and she would go there and visit there, not because we asked her to go, but because she chose to go. And she helped raise money for wheelchairs for children that were completely disabled. She did that through the school. She organized runs. And then she raised £5,000 when she went to boarding school in England for a sensory room, because the children there are either blind, deaf, they have some form of disability. And she would make, on a nice summer's day, would make lemonade, put up a poster, a stand, and sell lemonade outside her house to raise money for this charity. So just amazing. And then when the lockdown happened, they were in India, and she would cook, again, very simple, and we helped her, but just the dal and a rice, which we would package, and we live in a village called Kapasera, and she would go in a car, we know the local police, and help distribute that food in the local village. And she would do that at least once a week, all on her own. And she would, you know, organize it, do everything, and then we would go and help her do that as well. So really amazing. I'm really proud of what she does to help others.
Yeah, and that's again, I think it's the cultural upbringing, the thinking that comes out of it, that help people, look after people. I think that's very good to know. And
yeah,
congratulations.
and I've learned from her. I don't know how much I've role modeled her. I think she's role modeled me, if I were to be very honest.
Well, and there's no harm in that, right? There's no harm in that, in us learning something from the next generations. What we've learned from, you learn all the time, actually. And I think if you look at it that way, it's a wonderful growth possibility. Having talked of that, tell us about learnings from Mr. Fireside.
Gosh, I've learned a lot from Mr. Oberoi. First of all, Mr. Oberoi,
tell me the top two things. Come on.
Okay. So, do you know, again, Mr. Oberoi is absolutely obsessed with guest feedback. And he takes, you know, what Oberoi today has been as a result of his commitment 24/7 to the business. I think he puts the company, the organization, our people, our guests before anything else. And you know Mr. Oberoi well. It's 24/7 for him. So that's one of the things that I've learned, is that passion and that strive for absolute perfection in everything that we do at our hotels, and never compromising for providing our guests with the best experience. So that's one thing I've learned from him. The other thing that I've learned from Mr. Oberoi is Mr. Oberoi asks so many questions, and that is such a great skill. You know, he is always asking questions. And although it may seem quite simple, you know, it is really to always ask questions and dig deeper. Many times, you know, we treat the symptom, but we don't cure the disease. Mr. Oberoi is somebody who really wants to get to the root cause of things so that we can address problems completely rather than just dealing with them at the surface. And the other thing is Mr. Oberoi is, I talk to people who in the company who say that he's played such a role in shaping who they are today, in shaping their lives, both as professionals and also personally. So those are, just, you said three, so I've given you three that immediately came to my mind.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's a whole lot of it, but yeah, these are all three very important, very fundamental towards sort of not only the person but even the success as professional in what you do. So I think that's very critical, and I think I can understand each of these, knowing his sort of passion for not just hoteliering, but his passion for excellence and quality all the time. If there was changes that you had to make in hotels today to meet with, let's say, the challenges or the expectations of customers, whether it's from the accommodation side, the F&B side, any other service side, what do you think are changes that the customers are going to force upon you? Or I won't say force upon you, but to expect of you in the next few years?
So I think, my perception is that people are still looking for meaningful interaction. I think as human beings, and if you see what's happened with the lockdown and the restrictions on people's movement, one thing is very clear, that what people have really missed, whether it's with family, whether it's with friends, or whether it's with colleagues, and I'm not talking about our industry, and I'm not talking specifically about India alone. I think this is a global phenomena. People have missed human interaction, and we see that in interviews, in comments, in things we read. If we then translate that to our business, our business is about the care for our guests, how we look after our guests. And I think human interaction will always play an important role in that, or it'll be the most important aspect of that. I think where we need to look at technology is that, can we use technology to allow for greater human interaction and more meaningful human interaction? So the tasks that are tasks, can they be done through technology?
Right.
Which allows me as somebody working in a restaurant, or me as somebody working at the front desk, greater time and attention to focus on you, the customer, or you, the guest. So that's where I think we need to use technology, but I don't think human interaction will go away. And the other thing is give guests the choice. So if for example, at the Oberoi New Delhi, somebody wants to order something using the iPad from room service or request a service, give them that option to be able to do that without having to call somebody. But when somebody comes to deliver that to the room or provide the service that they've requested, it needs to be meaningful, it needs to be personalized, it needs to be sincere, and it needs to be done with a smile, and a genuine smile.
Well, that is so true, and that genuineness comes through even behind the mask. So I think that's a good thing, because that's the warmth of service. But let me pursue this point a little bit more. With changing demographics, and therefore potentially the changing character or attributes of the customers that are going to be coming into luxury hotels, their expectations of a luxury hotel are going to change, are going to be different from what they have been in the past. Do you see that same change, or did you think that there is still the product of the old that will still remain relevant, or do you see some tweakings that have to be done to meet the expectations of the younger lot?
Well,
how do you
I've understood the question, and I'll try and answer it, and you can maybe help me if I haven't been able to answer it. But I think today, first, and they're two separate things. I think today luxury is more accessible than it was in the past.
Yes.
And so there's, you know, a greater opportunity for a larger segment of the population globally to go and stay at a luxury hotel. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is that, you know, life has changed. The formality that we used to have, you know, earlier on is no longer there. I think also the boundaries between work and leisure are merging. And I think COVID has brought that, you know, has speeded that process up. So I think what, you know, people don't want to go to a formal restaurant or a very formal environment. You want to go somewhere where you're comfortable, where you don't need to be concerned about how you're dressed. You need to be able to interact with whoever you're with in a more informal manner. And also the service that we need to provide needs to have a greater sense of informality than it had in the past in what we would consider, you know, a traditional luxury hotel. So those are some of the changes that are shaping and will continue to shape, you know, how guests experience a luxury hotel and the service that they would expect from a luxury hotel.
Okay, I wasn't being rude, Vikram. I'm getting the questions on my WhatsApp chat, so
No,
I was just looking at that. There's a question. Sorry.
No, I'm really pulling your leg. I said just ask me the easy ones.
Yeah, I mean, what do you see the future of inbound leisure travel for India? And do you, I mean, let's say, I guess the pandemic is forcing some of that question. I guess it also rolls into the question of what do you see the recovery pattern of it? But do you see India remaining a very strong destination for inbound leisure? Do you see us growing, and what do we need to do to grow?
Right. So, you know, first of all, I love our country. And you take any aspect of our country, the people, the hospitality and the kindness that you receive from people if you travel around India, from our cuisine, our culture, our history, and therefore I still think that India is. I wish we had even more people who could travel to India and see, you know, the incredible country that we are. And the number of people who travel to India, I would still believe is very small. And I'm again talking pre-pandemic. True leisure travel is a very small number. And if you compare it with other countries in our region, there's a huge opportunity. So I think we need to do much more to really tell the India story, so that people can realize how incredible India is, and therefore want to come and travel and visit India. So that's the.
You believe that the long haul inbound travel will recover over the next 2 years, 4 years? What is your expectation?
So, you know, rather than answering that question directly, well, because it's based on various assumptions that we make, and therefore, you know, so the assumptions I'm making is that the vaccination process for COVID is well underway across many parts of the world. And for us, key source markets are Europe, or actually North America and Europe, where in the US, it's just under 2 million people. a day that are being vaccinated, and that number will increase. In the UK, they're saying they'll have the majority of the population vaccinated by May. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd like to, and I'm just going to draw a correlation. Egypt had a lot of trouble, and people stopped traveling to Egypt. But the minute things turned around, it was a V-shaped recovery. So people suddenly, and I'm talking at the US market, which is a very important market, certainly for our cruising, for our Nile cruises in Egypt. And we saw a huge spike very, very fast. So if I take that people, if the vaccinations continue as they are, at least so far, all suggestions are that, or all research is that the variants do get addressed by the vaccine. I think people will want to travel, and what I will go as far as saying is that maybe even before the end of this year, we will see leisure travel resuming, and it may be better than what we think. At least I'd hope so. So I'm not of the school that says people will not travel. I think we need to understand what is stopping people from traveling today, and if we believe the vaccine can address that, then why would they not travel? You know, if that fear is gone, then really that barrier for travel is eliminated. And I believe that will happen by, you know, certainly before October of this year for the developing world, or for the developed world, sorry.
Okay, for people coming in from the developed world, and yes, I agree with you that I've always held the view that the recovery will be faster than we expect it to be. I mean, we shouldn't have a huge expectation of going back to normal in 12 months' time, but it'll certainly be faster than a lot of people are expecting it to be. But let's look at the wider aspect of the inbound leisure travel. There's an element that certainly wants luxury and upper upscale hotels. There's also an element that is a little more price, but also quality conscious. Now, if I go back into the origin of Trident Hotels and where they started off, and you know the joint venture you had at that stage, and the Tridents that were developed in the 90s, Udaipur, Jaipur, Agra, a couple of others, versus the Tridents that are being developed now. Do you see a possibility of expanding into the sort of the upscale sector for yourselves, or will it be just the premium levels that you have? Do you see that sort of wider scope being brought in by Oberoi Hotels?
So I see there's an opportunity for an Indian developed lifestyle brand that brings not only for our Indian guests, the younger Indian guest, but also for people coming from overseas. And I certainly do see that as an opportunity. And I think it's something that we should see as an opportunity. And if we see it as an opportunity, we will then work towards addressing that opportunity and that need. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, you have. You certainly have. And I guess my other question around that is the present situation, which is lending itself to a reasonable demand or opportunity for conversions. Now, I know that when you looked at conversions, or when we look at conversions as well, some of the assets would not meet the sort of the exacting standards that you have. And I'm not being sort of critical here. You do have standards that have been set and that have served you well. Some of those conversion opportunities may not meet those standards, but do you think there's a possibility that you might be able to reconcile the two and handle the conversion opportunities in a way where that becomes sort of more real for you?
So I believe they are, and we've seen that with the Leela in Jaipur. That's just reopened under the Leela brand. So I think those opportunities are there today, and those opportunities will be there tomorrow as well, or into the future as well. When I look at Oberoi, I look at Trident, we don't need to open 50 hotels. So
Yes.
in the next 12 months. And I believe there are quality hotels in our country that would fit either the Oberoi or the Trident brand that could be flagged as an Oberoi or Trident hotel. And if those opportunities present themselves to us, we would absolutely look at them. The other thing is we need to be flexible, we need to be open-minded, and we need to find, it's easy to say no. Can we find a solution that allows us to do that? And I'm not saying compromise, but can things be done that if it's not perfect in all regard, what are the opportunities for us to still brand it as an Oberoi or Trident hotel without compromising our guest experience? And I believe opportunities will present themselves in going into the future.
Yes, they certainly will, and particularly at the Trident level. And that's where the possibility of reconciling what is there versus what you want in terms of standards over a period of time, that might really be the opportunity. Let me go back to
one other thing with that, because it's important. If we look at any relationship that is sustained over a period of time has to be a win for key stakeholders. So we need to find, and we're very aware and mindful of that as well, that when we are working with potential partners and owners, like our guests, we put them equally at the center of everything. So we need to find solutions and work with owners so that they're also happy, or they are very, very happy, and they get a return. One thing that Mr. Oberoi has always said is, if I give a friend money and ask him or her to go and buy me something, that friend, being a good friend, would take great care because I've trusted that person. And it's similar for an owner. The owner is trusting them with a significant investment that they have made in developing a hotel. How do we manage that hotel so that we can maximize their return? And how do we work with them and collaborate with them so that they're happy with us? And it's about collaboration.
I think that's a very important point, and that's an important aspect of the Oberoi. I don't know the dharma piece, but the ethics piece, because I've seen that conversation with Mr. Oberoi and with yourself and Arjun so often, that if it's not right, let's not do it, rather than just do it for the sake of doing it. So I think that is very essential. Tell me, what is it? Is there any one or two items about hotels that you don't like, or that you would want?
Sorry,
one or two things about. Tell me any one or two things about hotels that you don't like, that you would want to do differently. Something that irritates you when you go and stay in a hotel.
So I'm just trying to think what would irritate me if I stayed. I think one is to have a great level of flexibility when we deal with our guests. I think gone are the days when we had, or hotels had, rules and guests had to fall within those rules or those requirements. I think what today the world is where with any business, the customer, the guest is at the center of that business.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there. I'm asking you this from the point of view of yourself as a guest.
Yeah. So my very simple answer to that was that I don't want to be told what to do and what not to do. Let me give you a really simple example. If I would like breakfast at, and many hotels have done this, so I'm giving you this as an example, but if I want breakfast at 2 in the afternoon, please don't tell me I cannot get breakfast at 2 in the afternoon, right? As an example. I mean, I'm giving you a very, very basic example.
Okay.
As an example, I can't think of many things that irritate me in a hotel. I'm actually quite an easygoing. When I go and stay at other hotels or other brands, I'm actually quite an easygoing and very, very forgiving.
The point you make about the rules is very important. I know I interviewed another CEO, a global CEO, and on another forum, and he said, "What I don't like is being upgraded to suites all the time, because then I've got to go around and find all the lights and turn them off in the night."
Right.
It's something that I'd rather have a simple room. So it's a different way of.
And I would agree with that. I think if I go and stay at hotels, at an Oberoi hotel, or Trident, I always stay in a room. I don't stay in suites because that's where our guests stay. The majority of our guests stay in rooms. I also, people work differently today. I'll sit on a chair. I don't need to sit at a writing table to work. And if I have a living room, it's a space I would rarely use. So I think consumers or guests, the way they consume products and services are changing as well. I would much rather be in a spacious room rather than a small room with a large suite, with a large living room.
Okay, that's interesting. I think I'm going to go to the last question. There's actually so many questions that I can have this conversation go on for the next hour, but I think we need to respect everybody's time, including yours. But the last question is, what is your vision of the hotelier for the future? Now, I'm going to expand this. This is a question that came from the floor, but I'm going to expand it to say, what is that vision, and what advice would you give to the managers, the staff, the students for the future? It's a bit of a multi-pronged question, but if you might want
to. So what is the advice that I would give to and this is managed. Okay, students. So one of the things that I always, when I'm talking to my colleagues, whether it's at corporate office or at general managers, we need to start with the premise that people always do their best. And there are two ways when there's a problem, and there always will be problems. When there's a problem, there are two ways to approach that. One is to look outwards and point a finger. The other way is to look inwards and say, could I have done anything differently to support that individual or those individuals and help them so that this problem wouldn't have existed, or we could have done a better job. And I'm firmly of the belief that 99.9% of people, in fact 99.999% of people who are at Oberoi and Trident hotels don't come in and say we're going to do a bad job. They come in and put their hearts and souls into what they're doing. And when they make a mistake, or if something goes wrong, or we have a guest complaint, I think it's much more positive to say, what could I have done differently? Could I have supported that person in a better way? Could we have supported that person in a better way? Because I think then it's much more productive in that you then find a solution, not only for that situation, but you address it at a much deeper level. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I would say is, in any organization, the values and the culture are fundamental. For us at Oberoi and Trident, the values and the culture that we create really eventually drive individual behavior. And it's being true to those values, not when it's easy, but when it's difficult. Anybody can follow values when it's easy. Really, the test comes when it's not easy. Do you then hold true to your values? And really setting an example for others through your actions and demonstration of those values and culture. And the third very simple thing I would say is don't ask anybody to do anything you're not prepared to do yourself.
Very good. That is very good. And I'm gonna ask you for one or two words from the point of view of future careers. Is it very bright, modest, or less than modest? Which of these options would you say for people who want to join the industry? Very bright, modest, less than modest?
I would say very bright, and I'm going to explain why I say very bright. Because a career isn't a decision you take for today.
Yes.
A career is a decision you take for, depending on how old you are. So let's say if I'm finishing university, I've graduated, I'm in my early 20s, I'm going to work through to, let's say, 60 at least. That's a decision I'm taking for close to 40 years. And I certainly believe our business has a very bright future over a 40-year period.
Thank you, Vikram. I think that's a great message to end with. As I said, we could have gone on with this conversation much longer, but we might catch up some other time. Anyway, thank you so much for your time and for your very candid views. And thank you to everybody who's been participating and listening into this webinar, into this fireside chat, really. We will have a monthly fireside chat, so we look out for our next announcement. And again, thank you, Vikram, for all your time.
Vijay, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to all the participants as well. Thank you very much.
Good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.